Okay, how do I start my videos again?
Hello, my name might be Icarus, or is it just hello, my name is Icarus now?
I have no fucking idea. It feels like it's been forever with all the Tumblr shit. Nope, Nettle.
I know it's something along the line. I know it starts with hello, my name is Icarus. I don't know if it's like welcome back to my channel or what.
Well, that's gonna be my intro. This is my intro now. It's what the fuck is my intro, and then Briar says it.
Hello, my name is Briar, and welcome back to Icarus's channel.
Today I am roping Briar into a voiceover, partially because it's too dark for me to record, and also I'm tired after hanging drywall and grooming dogs, and that's pretty much all I've done today. Even though I was supposed to write. Oh well.
It sure is a dry wall, though.
It is a drywall with gaps. But I have been keeping up with the Depp v. Heard case, and after today's circus train, because today was Heard's first day of like the her defendant thing plus the countersuit, and it was nuts. So I want to describe what's been going on through this trial to Briar, who's only heard about shit through me.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll end with the uh, forensic psychologist, because that's fucking wild. So this is a 6-week trial, and what it is technically, it's a defamation case. Depp is suing Amanda Heard $50 million for her 2018 op-ed article in the Washington Post, where even though she didn't directly say his name, it was very clearly about Johnny Depp being a physical abuser to her.
Okay.
Domestic violence. Specifically, the title of the Washington Post article was something about sexual abuse. That's really important because there's a lot of back and forth I'll get into in a minute. But the entire article was in conjunction with the ACLU. And so Depp just finished up a UK trial thing where he lost the case because he was suing the Sun for posting something about like why would J.K. Rowling have wife beater Johnny Depp, whatever, and he lost because the Sun and the writer of the article basically were like, we were just taking what Amber Heard said. And so now he's suing Amber Heard in Virginia, because Virginia is where the Washington Post's like online servers are held or something. Plus, from what I understand, the libel, slander, suit stuff is less restrictive than California. And then Amanda Heard is countersuing him for shit his lawyer has said about her making everything up. But I don't remember for how much. So, up until today, we've had all of Depp's witnesses. And this is like day 12. Because they're only doing this Monday through Thursday, so the Virginia court can have motions heard from other shit on Friday, because, yeah, let's not forget this is a fucking Virginia court.
There are other people that are having legal issues.
Yeah.
Believe it or not.
They exist. It's not all Depp v. Heard. And it's really cool because apparently Johnny Depp was the one who wanted to have this all publicized, and Amber Heard's team tried to shut it down. The UK one wasn't publicized, and it's pretty clear that the entire reason this is going on. Nettle, you are so annoying. Everyone's going to hear you be a baby, and they're going to be mad that they can't see you. But
Part of the voiceover can be a picture of her.
I don't have any good pictures of her at the moment. Nettle.
A great picture of her with her face all blurred.
Right, because she's attacking her new toy.
Yes.
But
Anyway.
so it's very clear that Depp, at least, doesn't care if he wins or loses this trial. He literally just wanted to tell his story, and that's done. But it's been insane. So Amber Heard has been declaring that she's had psychological damage and mental distress this entire time. So she's been examined by two forensic psychologists, one on Depp's side and one on Amber Heard's side. And I want to get your opinion on like what I tell you about their testimony, if you think it's smart or not. Because, disclaimer, Briar's actually majored in psychology and started getting a master's degree in.
Then COVID hit, and I
No,
was-
what is your degree?
Industrial organizational psychology. I thought you said and, not in.
Yeah, started getting industrial organizational, which is telling people how to get along at work.
It's the psychology of how workplaces and organizations function.
This is your get along shirt.
This is your get along shirt. I'm not going to tell the really lame joke because no one except for my mentors ever laughed at it.
Okay, we'll just leave that as a cliffhanger.
Mystery.
A mystery. So, not quite forensic psychology, but enough to know like the basics of how shit should be. And the forensic psychologist for Depp's side was Dr. Curry. She so she is specifically works with PTSD a lot in a military capacity over in Hawaii. And so she's got years and years and years of experience. She's not board certified, but she is like a licensed psychologist. And she went through all the audio tapes, all of the previous therapist records, psychologist records, psychiatrist records of Heard's, and she interviewed Heard for like 12 hours, going through these tests that are supposed to help indicate if Heard is malingering. Do you know what malingering is?
I do know what malingering is. It's right. Malingering is when you sort of make up how you are. You get the idea of how you want to respond. Like, if it's a PTSD test, you know the answers that will lead to an idea of, yes, this person has PTSD. If someone knows that there are flashbacks and triggers and all that other stuff, they will tailor their answers or even just straight up lie to create responses that reflect those sort of flashbacks and triggers and all of the symptoms, because they know what the answer should be to get the result that they want.
And how would a test measure against that to try and figure out if they're malingering or not?
One of the ways that you test for malingering is you do reverse questions, basically. It's like a counterbalance. It's when you're taking those tests and they seem kind of obvious, where they'll have a question that's like, I'm really active and I love people, and then later down the line you have, I'm really sedentary and I hate people. There are times that people mess up those questions when they're not taking it seriously, when they're trying to tailor their answers, they don't quite correlate. One of the other things that you go into is you look at the aggregate result of a lot of different tests, which is why she probably went for 12 hours with multiple different ones, to see how much the answers are going to align, if they're differing here, if they're consistent within it, because people, hi baby, people that have incorrect answers or malingering answers might not be able to uphold the same level over time and over tests. So the way they respond at the very beginning in test 1 might differ between the very end and test like 6, just because they forget how they responded with the first one, and when they get to that one, there's fatigue, they're scattered, they've been going at this for 12 hours, but if it was the truth, then it would align. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. So having a test that's like 500 questions long.
Jesus Christ. Yeah, that's going to end with a lot of test fatigue. You get to the end of that and you are dead on your feet. However, if you are answering consistently, if you are answering truthfully, despite the fatigue, beginning to end, you should be consistent. If you're trying to malinger, come up with these answers, by the end, you might start slipping up, making things that, or responding in a way that doesn't reflect the beginning because you're exhausted, you forget what you said, you forget what you've already answered, you just want it to be fucking over.
Yeah, so Dr. Curry, the PTSD expert, said that she found that Amber Heard didn't really qualify for PTSD. Like, she would know the answers to give, but when she took the test, it wasn't consistent, or like some of the questioning, like when you go into some of the more obscure details, the things that you don't see on TV or movies
Yeah.
so much, that's when the story started breaking apart. And, fuck, where did my brain go? So, my next question for you is, how do you feel about someone who's only been working with someone else diagnosing them with specific disorders?
What do you mean?
Okay, so Dr. Curry went on the stand and testified that she believes Amber Heard has borderline personality and histrionic disorder.
Okay.
And she's only actively worked with Amber Heard for 12 hours.
So, in 12 hours, you can get a general inkling. After 12 hours, I don't think you can say with pure confidence that someone has something, especially like borderline personality, because that's a very nuanced personality disorder. There are some things where you can, unless she hits the textbook marks consistently, you can't say with a lot of confidence, but after 12 hours, I would hesitate to say, even if she hit those marks. That's just not really enough time to come up to say you definitely have this diagnosis. You can be like, I would like to look at this further. This is what I'm thinking. I would like to speak to this person for longer. If there's medication involved, there's a lot of, we'll give you this mild version of it and see how you respond. And if you respond correctly, that's more evidence. But I guess for 12 hours, I guess at the same time I'm thinking is you go into a psychiatrist's office and they can diagnose you rather quickly. But whether or not that's just an in and out thing.
Well, this is something that's being put on national, even international news because it's being streamed to YouTube. And there's people commenting from like Australia and New Zealand.
Yeah. So I guess my final statement is I would be somewhat uncomfortable saying with absolute certainty that she absolutely has it. But if the psychologist or whatever says, the forensic psychologist says, I would be confident and I believe that this may be the case, that would be the wording I would go with. She shows signs of this, it is likely or it would be very possible. Not absolutely, this is definitely the truth.
A lot of what Dr. Curry's stuff came across is that Amber Heard does have some trauma from her childhood abuse. She was abused by her father and her mother. She would have to like figure out how to take care of her siblings, that sort of thing. Johnny Depp also has abuse as a child, specifically from his mother. So that was all very interesting to hear about. But Dr. Curry also mentioned that Amber Heard's not quote unquote, she didn't quote say this, but she's kind of talking about Amber as a chameleon of sorts, where she would adopt other people's what they like, their interests, their sort of mannerisms to be liked and wanting to be around.
The social chameleon.
Pretty much. And she'd get like really, really anxious and upset if she was parted from anyone. And that's some of the stuff you can actually hear in the video chats and stuff. I want to go to a different counselor. They had a marriage counselor come up at the very start of the trial who mentioned something about them being mutually abusive to each other. And this comes up in Dr. Hughes' testimony from today as well, because they asked, what is mutual abuse? Is that an actual thing? What do you think?
Mutual abuse absolutely is an actual thing. You get into this idea, and the popular idea is there's only one person who can be abusive. There's an abuser and a victim. But the reality is, people don't work that way. When you think about toxic behaviors in relationships, it's not, it can be one person has all of the aggressive tendencies and one person is constantly the victim. But a lot of the times, the person, like both people will lash out in certain ways. They'll all have behaviors that end up being neglectful, or especially if you have a couple, and from what I've heard a little bit, they argue back and forth constantly. And a lot of the recordings they have, going back and forth in the things that are said between each other, like if you're both mutually insulting each other and trying to tear each other down, that's abusive in both directions.
Yeah, and this isn't saying that people who are in domestically violent situations and are defending themselves are being mutually abusive.
Oh, no, not at all.
It's just there are it from Briar's and my understanding, what we're seeing so far on Depp's side at least is Depp's trauma reaction is to run and hide or beat up shit, not beat up people, but like tear apart a kitchen or when he's wigging out in shock from getting his finger smashed, he will write on the walls. God, I'm not meaning to laugh. It's just such a. He was definitely in shock because I think he had a bit of a mental break,
Yeah.
or he got in an argument with Heard and tossed all her clothes over the balcony into the a penthouse because apparently the penthouse has 3 floors. What the fuck, rich people?
For real.
Uh, so, and then Amber Heard was the I don't want you to leave. I would much rather fight and follow him around and smack him around and like get verbally and physically in his face. So it's not a situation where you have someone who is being abusive and the other person is reacting. They're kind of reacting to each other, at least as far as we hear on the Depp side of things. We are just now getting into Heard, and we want to keep ourselves as open as possible because, I mean, Amber Heard's whole thing actually uh, started the divorce and the restraining order and all that stuff happened right at the start of the Me Too movement. So there's a lot of people looking at this and like this can be a way to invalidate all the good that the Me Too movement has done.
Which is bullshit.
It is bullshit.
And I do have to say, for thank you, Nettle, certain aspects, wanting space and running away because you're afraid of the conflict is not abusive. Things like that, like a response like that, especially when it comes from trauma, is not actively trying to hurt the other person. However, when he's having his moments of trashing things, when you look into it, what he's trashing is important. If he's trashing both of their things, it's a reaction. If he's trashing only her things, if he's like tossing her clothes over, and if he consistently only hurts and destroys things that are hers and leaves his alone, then that is an action against her.
That's actually interesting because for the most part it sounded like he would take stuff out on like the house. There was the only testimony I can remember of him going specifically after Amber's stuff is when he tossed all of the stuff over the balcony or whatever. The other times it's like it's the kitchen cabinets, he's slamming things around. Or it's the walls and the lampshade and
Yeah.
the mirrors.
And that sounds like a reaction, but it's one of those things that, and this is, I suppose, related, but when you have a reaction like that, if you're out of control enough to destroy things, but in control enough to avoid your own things specifically, you know?
Yeah. He would actually, according to the last security personnel that had a witness testimony, he looked like Santa Claus, by the way, a bald Santa Claus. He mentioned that Johnny Depp would oftentimes when he was getting out to get away from Amber, he would pack up some of his most precious belongings and take with him.
That I could see as a fear that she would hurt something, because I know for some of the situations that I've been in, there have been times where I've wanted to hide things that mattered to me in the fear that someone else would hurt them.
That's fair. There's been times I've wanted to punch a wall, so I took down 2 walls upstairs. That works. Going back to the psychology thing. So the DSM-5 is out, right?
Yes.
Why would someone choose to reference the DSM-4 when the DSM-5 is out?
Briar stares at Icarus in confusion and mild upset, because I really can't figure out why someone would reference the DSM-4 unless it doesn't appear in the DSM-5. But if it doesn't appear in the DSM-5, my friends, I wouldn't reference it anyways. It's an updated manual. It's the updated understanding of psychological terminology and disorders and all that others, like all of the other things. This is what is believed by psychologists today. If there are changes made from the DSM-4, it's because it's no longer believed. So if you're referencing an old text, you're referencing beliefs that are no longer held.
Okay, so follow-up question. Do you remember when the DSM-5 came out?
God, no.
I don't either. I want to look that up real
Look
quick.
that up.
Okay, it came out in 2013. So the forensic psychologist, I haven't told you which one of them just yet, that talks about using the DSM-4 mentioned that she preferred to use the DSM-4 in this case because it has more research behind it at the time. Like documented research.
My first instinct is to call bullshit. Because all of the research that went into the DSM-4 is there for the DSM-5. They didn't toss it the fuck out. They took what was in the DSM-4 and then they added more research to it.
That's really interesting to hear because the forensic psychologist that used it was Dr. Curry.
Really?
Yeah. I don't remember the exact statements why, but she basically said that she used the DSM-4 because at the time that she was doing this evaluation on Heard, it was very recently in 2021, I think. And she was just like, the body of evidence in the DSM-4 is currently more comprehensive or something like that.
If by comprehensive she means she understands it better, in the fact that, or the idea that the information is laid out in a more user-friendly or easy-to-read format, but I don't know, I'm not an expert, but I can't personally think of a reason why you would reference the DSM-4.
Also, if it's more user-friendly or easier to read, that's a fucking design problem, not a psychology problem.
Yeah, the DSM-5 done fucked up if that's the case.
Okay, so that's it for the older psych people. Today's case, I've told you a little bit about it already, but okay. So, again, the entire time I've been watching this, I've been trying to remain neutral. The whole Depp v. Heard thing, I didn't even hear about until it came out that he was not going to get to play Grindelwald anymore. Which was very weird news to hear because it's like J.K. Rowling is a TERF, and then Johnny Depp abuses his wife, and then a month or so later, Johnny Depp doesn't abuse his wife. She lied. And it's like, what? My world is going to chaos. I don't want to deal with this right now. I'm going to stick my head in the ground and just ignore everything. And now I don't do that anymore. Now I just look at stuff and I'm like, what the fuck? So...
And I don't look at anything.
No, you don't. You just get adjacent stuff from me.
I do. Precarious information.
So, I'm still trying to keep as open a mind as possible because Johnny Depp's always been very private about his personal life anyway. So it's like we don't know what's going on behind closed doors. This is part of what's supposed to be finding out.
Yeah, you don't want to go into anything, especially this sensitive, and like abuse about people that you don't know with a bias.
Yeah, I really wonder how the jury got picked out and how they're dealing with it. But today was the first day of Amber Heard's case, and they decided instead of Amber Heard herself going first, like they planned, after Dr. Curry's whole smackdown with the borderline and the not having PTSD symptoms and any real significant amount to be diagnosed, that sort of thing. So we need to bring some credibility back to Amber Heard before she goes on the stand. So we have Dr. Dawn Hughes, who is more of she's a forensic psychologist as well. She's testified in apparently over 50 cases. She is board certified because that was a huge thing that Dr. Curry's not board certified.
Yeah, it is.
And she also she specializes in basically interpersonal violence
Okay.
or intimate relationship violence, that sort of thing. She has been using gendered language throughout her entire testimony. So when she's defining domestic violence, she's using the victim with feminine pronouns and the perpetuator with masculine pronouns.
Yeah, I hold big issue with that if you're going into a case like this. The rhetoric you use definitely matters. There's already a misconception enough that women cannot be abusers and men cannot be victims, than to fill the jury with this constant onslaught of he abused her, he abused her, he abused her, he abused her. Even if they're trying to keep an open mind, that does tick people through. It's the idea of this, it's not subliminal messaging, but that's the general gist of it. That's not the psychological term, but I forget what it is. It's prepping people to go into something to understand he abused her. And then it gets in their mind that he abused her and that he is the abuser and she is the victim. And having that consistently put in, despite all of the evidence, is going to sway people's opinions.
So if you're Amber Heard and Amber Heard's team hiring this forensic psychologist, you want her to use that language.
Oh, absolutely. And, you don't coach witnesses, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's,
No, you absolutely do coach witnesses.
Oh, I thought that was something you weren't supposed to do.
Not like in the middle of the trial, but like before the trial happens, you sit down, you run through them the questions that could possibly come up. You try to mentally prepare them because standing at the witness stand, even in direct questioning, is stressful, let alone cross.
That's very fair. Then I suppose I wouldn't be very surprised, and I would be very confident in saying, I can't say for sure, not 100% absolutely, but I would be very confident in saying that that was a conscious choice to keep using that language instead of trying to find something gender neutral or switching them back, because that rhetoric matters.
And how about if you use a quote unquote example of domestic abuse, like just still laying down foundation, and you use Amber and Johnny as the names? As Amber being the one, your theoretical Amber being the one being abused, and your theoretical Johnny being the abuser.
That hurts me. That hurts me from the idea that me saying it's prepping people to think he hurt her, Johnny hurt Amber. That's so blatantly trying to get into people's minds to accept that as the basis. The basis going into this is going to be Johnny hurt Amber. What the fuck? That's so underhanded.
Okay, so continuing on with this, the defense, Heard's team, also asked questions about, does size matter when it comes to physical abuse? And Dr. Hughes said absolutely. A punch from a 150-pound woman is not going to hit the same as a 180-pound man.
Okay, and my opinion on this is that statistically, that's probably correct. The punch from a 150-pound woman, statistically, probably doesn't hurt as much as the punch from a 180-pound man. However, that doesn't mean the punch from a 150-pound woman doesn't hurt. And it does not mean that being punched by someone who's 150 pounds, if that is a woman and you are a 180-pound man, doesn't have more than just physical repercussions. Having someone that matters to you hitting you in any degree, that's also emotional and psychological, because this person clearly wants to hit you. You don't just brush that off. You don't brush it off as something that's insignificant, even if it might hurt less than the 180-pound man hitting the 150-pound woman. Statistically, yeah, it probably hurts a little bit more. In reality, it doesn't really fucking matter.
How about if you throw a vodka bottle so hard you smash someone's finger off?
Yeah, see, that would fucking do it. It does not matter that the size is there. Statistically, yes. In reality, no.
How do you feel about the fact that Dr. Hughes decided to say, yeah, it absolutely does matter. That's why boxing has weight classes.
Briar sighs very heavily 3 times in quick succession. Yeah, if you're going into a fight, it's going to matter. However, those people are not in an emotionally significant relationship. If you're boxing with your significant other, then that's your deal, whether or not you can leave that in the ring. However, boxers don't matter to each other. They don't sleep next to each other at night. They don't depend on each other for emotional safety and validation. People in a relationship do. So no, I personally do not think size matters, because it's not just about the physical aspect of this. You can't divorce emotions and psychological repercussions from this just because of physicality.
I am definitely one to agree with you there. And I have way less thing. It felt so counter to the push lately to talk about how in domestic violence, ultimately size doesn't matter. That
It doesn't.
that women can be just as abusive as men. And she went into how women can abuse in these ways, but men abuse in these ways that are always much more physical, more violent. She is very biased because, from what it sounds like, she works with a lot of female abuse victims.
And this is one of those things that, the famous saying, there's 3 types of lies.
Yeah.
Statistics, it sounds like that's what she's using, and she's using it in her favor, which is something that you do with statistics, but it's not really that ethical to do. You can present these statistics. Statistically, yes, men resort to more physical violence than women in abusive relationships. That is a statistical fact. However, that does not mean women do not resort to physical violence. Looking at the statistics gives you a general overview. It doesn't matter as much when you look into a specific relationship. It doesn't matter that more men are physically abusive. It does not matter that there are more reports of men being the abusers than women. That does not mean women cannot abuse. and that does not mean women are not physically abusive. And presenting them in the way that it sounds like she's doing is trying to again skew people's beliefs into viewing this as an unlikely scenario. Oh, it's much more likely that he's the abuser. It's much more likely that he's physically abusive, without acknowledging the reality.
And the statistics are skewed anyway in this particular thing, right? Because men underreport.
Well, yeah, men underreport, and it's for this one. For that, in the instance, I wouldn't feel comfortable blaming the statistics, because men underreport. You can say it's men are underreporting, and that is a problem, and you do need to consider that as something more. However, the statistics aren't biased. These are just numbers that you have. For what we know, this is the general thing. You can assume that there are more men that aren't reporting, but there are also women that don't report things as well.
I would just say, like, in the vast majority with the system that we have currently set up socially, men are more likely to underreport than women.
No, and I agree that that's true, but since it's unknown, you can't say to what degree.
This is where we would get in a fight because you're more of a numbers person and I'm more emotional.
Yeah, and this is one of those things that you are approaching this emotionally because it matters to you that men underreport, and it does matter to me as well, but statistics aren't moral, they aren't emotional, these are the numbers you have to look at, or I look at the both things, where it's an unknown, you can't speculate specifics of an unknown.
This is why you like numbers so much.
This is why I like numbers. I work with numbers.
Okay, so moving on from that, she did admit that she's had a same-sex relationship of domestic violence in 1998. Apparently that was her first one. So she gets a kudo with that, right?
Sure.
A single one.
I was like, has she done any more?
It didn't come up because it was a question from the defense that's doing the direct, and they're like, so men aren't the only ones that can be abusers, right? And she's like, no, there are absolutely men who can be abuse victims. I've even had a same-sex relationship. She didn't detail what the same-sex relationship was, but I'm assuming because she was like, no, absolutely women can be abusive too to men, I'm assuming it's like a man.
Yeah, if you're talking about the men having a chance to be a victim, it wouldn't make sense to reference a lesbian couple.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's also presenting the man as the abuser again.
Mm-hmm.
Which is bullshit.
But then we go in a little bit more, and they start getting into the details of what Amber Heard's review was. And for this one, Dr. Hughes, she worked with her for 29 hours. I don't know if she listened to all the recordings or anything, but she had direct talking points with Amber Heard for 29 hours and did see her showing symptoms of PTSD and that sort of thing. But before I get into some of the details, she also had her notes at the stand. She had her testimony at the stand. Like, her notes, her report, not stuff that was put into evidence.
Yeah, that seems to me to be total and absolute bullshit.
And it became a circus. And again, this is the first day of Amber Heard's sort of, it's not a rebuttal. The rebuttal will be when the plaintiffs come back and they bring in the rebuttal witnesses and stuff. But this is Amber Heard's, my time to tell the story. And immediately her first expert witness, who is an expert, who has done 50 of these things at least, comes in. She has her notes. She's looking at her notes. She's reading her notes. And like every 10-15 minutes, the lawyers have to go up for a sidebar to just discuss the notes in detail. And she's looking through her notes while they're talking.
See, that's either she's spewing bullshit or she's underprepared, and I don't appreciate either. If her notes are, perfectly accurate to her abilities, the fact that she needs to reference them means that she's underprepared.
Yep, and I've been listening to this with lawyers talking about it, and what they explained, because I wouldn't have known this, is you're not allowed to have notes on the stand. The most you're allowed to have is like a bottle of water. And if you're supposed to be responding to this like you've memorized what you can, and if you have forgotten anything, the lawyer's allowed to be like, "Here, do you need this to help your memory?" And you can be like, "Yeah." And so then they present you the document and you look at this particular part and then you put it back down. And she was referencing the notes and reading the notes when she wasn't supposed to. It ended up getting to a point where they stood and they like talked for 10 minutes, and she got reprimanded in front of the jury and had to put her notes in a folder so she wasn't looking at them anymore.
Good.
So, moving on past that fuckery, she also the the language she was using when talking about the tests, and she didn't really talk about them. Like, the difference between her and Dr. Curry's testimony is insane. Dr. Curry was all, these were the tests I gave, this is the information I got from the tests. And during cross, they kept asking her questions, and she was like, can I reference my notes? And they're like, nope, we're going to move on. We're going to talk about muffins, because that was a whole thing. I don't have time to get into that now. And with Dr. Hughes, she's like referencing her notes, but she's not really talking about these are the type of tests I gave. She's talking about other people giving Amber the tests. So that's interesting for me, that she's not directly doing this herself for a national, international level case.
Yeah, were they like her lab underlings, or were they just separate psychologists that she was pulling the information from?
I think she was rendering the test directly, but she wasn't there. Or like she let someone else that was under her do it, whereas Dr. Curry did this herself.
Okay.
And so there was that. And then she just starts talking about she doesn't remember the tests, but she starts talking about all these things that Amber told her. Like, they were besties getting lunch. Like, and then Amber told me this, and she did this, and Johnny Depp was obsessive, and she kept bringing up the idea of lethality. So, like, not directly saying it, but basically saying that Johnny Depp was escalating to a point that he was going to kill Amber. She started talking about sexual violence without, like, she was just like, and then this thing happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. It wasn't in my estimation, according to what Heard said, etc., etc. It was, this happened.
Yeah, that sounds it whether it's just the presentation of information and she did anything legitimate, she's not phrasing it in a sense that makes it seem legitimate. It makes it sound like they were gossiping. She's not referencing maybe any specific question she asked and how it relates to how Amber's responses relate to what she was looking for in her question. She's just relaying it sounds just like gossip. If she said, I asked this question, I was looking for this sort of what she felt about this thing, and she told me this, and this is what I pulled out of that information, that would be one thing. But it doesn't sound like that's what she was doing.
It absolutely wasn't. It just sounded like she was gossiping and presenting what Amber told her as fact. This gets to a very interesting crux, though. I told you about how the Washington Post had, like, Amber Heard sexual abuse, that sort of thing, in the title.
Yes.
So, the actual case, like, not what Johnny Depp is wanting to do with this, what she already did, but the actual case of defamation, one of the 3 parts is that Washington Post title. And they do, after the plaintiff rests, so once they're all done with their half of things, there's always a motion to strike. And the defense was saying this really big piece of defamation that you guys are talking about, the title, Amber Heard had nothing to do with it. She didn't make the title. The fact that she tweeted it later, that doesn't count. It wasn't republication, that sort of thing, or endorsement or whatever. And all of that stuff. So they're like, we're trying to toss this out. In Dr. Hughes' testimony, the thing that got to Amber Heard the most was the sexual abuse stuff, that she wasn't being taken seriously about it.
Okay.
So they can't throw the title out anymore.
No, and I would agree to that. If that's something that matters to her and that title was something that she thought was important to get out, it doesn't matter whether or not she wrote it herself. If she's defending that title, then it's relevant.
Yeah, and also, it needs to be said that this is the first time that there is mention of sexual abuse in this case outside of the title. Like, that didn't come up with any of the other psychologists or anything. This is the first time it's being directly connected outside of Amber Heard's past trauma.
Okay.
And another big thing that hasn't come up, but the door is open, is Amber Heard actually got arrested for DV in the past.
Did she?
Yeah, either like a previous wife or a girlfriend. She got arrested for DV.
Okay, yeah. That's relevant information.
And that didn't... You would expect that they would want to get on top of that.
Yeah, you would.
But they didn't do that.
I would be interested in knowing more.
I'm very interested in knowing why. Cross tomorrow is going to be amazing. But the final juicy bit of drama that I just want to tell you before we close out this video, because it's already almost an hour long, is Dr. Curry was in the gallery.
Really?
She was in the gallery for this. She is still subject to recall, but because she's an expert witness, she's allowed to see everything else going on.
Oh, I would love to know what's going on in her mind.
Well, Dr. Hughes started just putting her down on the stand.
The bitch!
Because she's like, no, Dr. Curry's completely wrong. These tests that she was doing, that it's not supposed to be used in a percentile method because it's like all biased and shit. And also the DSM-4 sucks.
Unfortunately, I do have to agree with that one, but like on the you want, I suppose, to disregard the other person, but damn!
And that's still not the best part. The lawyer for Heard, who's doing the direct, called Dr. Hughes Dr. Curry 3 times.
Jesus. Oh, the insult Dr. Hughes must have felt to be called the inferior Dr. Curry.
Yeah, Dr. Curry's not even board certified, and they harped on that hard during her
damn.
cross.
Oh, that's actually delightful. That I'm gasping like a teenage girl on gossip.
Dr. Curry lives rent-free in this woman's head.
She does, and she's pretty angry about it. She squats rent-free.
But I was just really curious to get like your opinions on this stuff, because I've been watching a lot of this trial info, and on the days that they're not doing it, I've been listening to a lot of lawyer talk, and I started watching some psychologist talk as well. And one of the things that this particular psychologist brought up was the fact that Dr. Curry opted to diagnose Heard on the stand.
Yeah.
And I didn't think about that, but I feel like, yeah, it's kind of irrelevant. I would have personally, if I was on the stand, died. But if I was able to talk, I would have been like, I see symptoms that relate to BPD and histrionic personality disorder.
Yeah, giving people something to hold on to that's concrete does make sense.
But yeah, that's...
I do have I suppose you can cut this out if you need to, but the idea is we talked about the PTSD and Amber Heard not having PTSD from this, but having symptoms of PTSD for Dr. Hughes. If she had a abusive childhood, the PTSD from the childhood can carry over into her reactions and the way she interacts with the world as an adult, but it does not mean she has PTSD from this particular relationship. It doesn't just go away. It could be there. She could have symptoms, but whether or not it's related to this.
And you want to know what Dr. Curry said?
What?
Exactly that. That Amber Heard is like, has hyper anxiety and that sort of thing from her trauma as a kid. And it was very important to Dr. Curry to try and parse out what has been there long term and what has been there since her relationship started with Depp in like 2012.
Yeah, that matters. Because you can't just say someone has symptoms of PTSD and then decide it comes from wherever you'd like. Where those things come from does matter. It doesn't just soak up everything. So that was my final thought that I wanted to get out there.
My final thoughts on the thing is I'm still trying very hard to be neutral. And in fact, I've been turned off of several of the live streams because the lawyers are very obviously biased towards Johnny Depp right now. And it makes sense to be biased towards Depp right now because he just got all his story out.
Yeah.
But I'm really liking Emily D. Baker because she tries to be very neutral. And she has hilarious reactions. She is streaming all this week too, so I'm very grateful because she's got the most neutral look on all of this. Even when her chat is going off on stuff, she's just like, this is something that could be useful for the other side. It's going to be, we got to wait and see. I'm not going to comment on this because it's not something I can comment. Like, people keep asking her, where do you think this case is going? She's like, I'm not going to comment. They both can lose.
I think that's very respectful and respectable of her. That's how you want to approach a situation like this. The moment you start getting into bias, you start twisting information in your head, even if you're not, it doesn't mean you're like maliciously going, oh ho ho, I'm gonna read this in this particular way, but you start listening to information and interpreting it in ways that meet your bias. You have an expectation of how this will go, so you might find this bit of information that proves your point more valid or more important than this bit of information that doesn't prove your point, which you're more willing to discount when it should be taken. It should be approached with equal value and judged individually, independent of any other thing there.
I totally agree. And that's what I feel like it helps that they're having the trial in Virginia because, like, it may be a little easier to find people who aren't, like, super fans of Johnny Depp there. Like, Virginia feels like a nothing state, even though it's, like, actually pretty culturally significant. But, yeah, no, I wanted to talk about this. It's a very interesting case. It has a lot of implications towards domestic violence in general, celebrities, and domestic violence towards men, as well as now that BPD and histrionic personality disorder has been thrown into the case. Like, what are people going to do with that? And then there's this whole thing about, like, Twitter and TikTok and YouTubers just commenting on this all the time, making memes and stuff. But that's a video for another time. It's all just...
Court of public opinion.
The court of public opinion is a hell of a bitch.
Oh, yeah.
But this in particular, this first day just got to me so much that I was like, I have to talk to Briar about this, and I have to record our thoughts because it was a circus.
It sounds like a shit show, to be honest.
And I am so fascinated about what's going to happen tomorrow. And I say tomorrow, I'm publishing this on May 4th. So when I'm publishing this, it's going to be the day that they're doing cross.
It's recorded the day before.
It's recorded the day before.
It's like 9:10-ish at night.
9:18. It's
Oh.
almost 9:30.
It's late. This isn't coming out.
This is not coming out May
Oopsie.
3rd. I'm sleepy. I still have to do something to go with this voice because I don't want to just leave it at a blank screen like I've been doing the past few times I've been doing voiceovers. But yeah, that's going to be it for me tonight / today / whenever you guys decide to watch this. If you decide to watch this, I'm going to have to add trigger warnings because we're talking about domestic violence.
Mm-hmm.
And
That'll be it for me.
that's going to be it from you. And I'm going to definitely read Whipping Girl for next week. God kill me. And then I'm actually working. I was inspired by some of this stuff to want to work on a video about cults and cults of personality and parasocial relationships and how all of these things kind of intertwine with each other, especially online.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to be fun to get into. And I'll probably have Briar on for that as well, with our faces.
Oh, I'm gonna be appearing.
I mean, you've already been in the background of videos playing Pokemon.
True. You've seen me hunched over next to a TV, probably swearing quietly. Hopefully you didn't hear that bit.
But yeah, it's going to be at the end of this trial too. I want to talk about my own opinions that I have created from this, because outside of listening to the lawyers and the psychologist about the law and the psychology behind this, I've been keeping pretty isolated from any of the greater news. So I feel like I am jury adjacent.
Yeah, and I would say you're allowed to have your own opinion because you don't affect the outcome.
Yeah, I don't affect the outcome. That's true. Alright, well, I'm going to end this here because it's like an hour long.
Drink water? Is that something you say at the end of your videos?
Yes, stay hydrated, because I never do. I have a water bottle. I'm going to drink water because I'm hella dehydrated today. And I will talk to y'all later. Bye.